Okay, fantastic.
Maria Elsa, we had adjusted the program, so you will go first.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for logging in early. And we're going to be starting at the top of the hour in a couple of seconds. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us once again for the third in our webinar series on the topic Innovation, Digital Government, and Changing Mindsets for Public Sector Transformation. We are delighted to be collaborating with our partners, UN DESA, for putting on this webinar series. And if you happen to have missed the first two, not to worry, you can catch the recording by going to our YouTube page, Caribbean Center for Development Administration. And today's topic, we are going to be looking at innovation in public service delivery. And we're going to be specifically delving in on conditions for successful innovation in digital transformation in the age of AI, artificial intelligence. So, I am Loy Parks. I work with CARICAD as the Leadership Development and Institutional Strengthening Specialist. And I want to especially welcome all of you, our stakeholders, those who might be here for the very first time at a webinar. And if you happen to be here for the very first time, please let us know in the chat. Okay. So what are our specific objectives today? We want to explore approaches to fostering innovation in the public sector context, particularly looking at our Caribbean context. We want to also explore what are the conditions for successful innovation in digital transformation in this age of artificial intelligence. And we want to better understand the public sector skills required for artificial intelligence to be successfully implemented and to foster digital transformation. So what is our agenda? We are going to start off with a presentation on artificial intelligence and digital transformation competency framework for civil servants. We are going to be following that presentation with another on innovation mindsets, promoting digital skills and changing mindsets. And the final presentation will be on the role of public service training institutions in supporting public sector innovation. And we are going to give an opportunity for us to have an open discussion, question and answers, and then close off with our key insights for today's webinars, as well as our evaluation poll. So first off, I want to introduce to you our first speaker. She is Dr. Marielza Oliveira, and she is the director of the UNESCO Communications and Information Sector Division for Digital Inclusion, Policies and Transformation. Her bio is in the information booklet that would have already been disseminated to you. And so you could read that up to learn more about her expansive work and experience. And so at this time, I want to just invite her to take the floor. Marielza, over to you.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you so much for the good, warm welcome. And I appreciate the invitation to join this important webinar series made to UNESCO and to myself. So hope you can all hear me well. And let me share my screen so that I can, give you a view of our digital transformation competencies in the public sector. So hold on. Sharing the screen, and now looking for this slide for the presentation slideshow, and go from the beginning. Can you? Oh, how weird. I think that they're showing me the actual. Showing you the screen that I should be seeing, not the other way around. So hold on for a second, if I can reverse that. Swap. Okay, good. Does that, I hope everybody is seeing that well.
That is fine.
Great, fantastic. So thank you very much. All right. So I don't know what happened. I guess that's well, I mean, I hope you don't mind seeing these slides as it is this way then. Somehow my display is not doing what it should be doing. But anyways, UNESCO works on the protection of human rights online and on communication and information advancement. And a key topic for us, of course, is the issue of digital transformation, because it has such enormous potential for accelerating sustainable development. But there are plenty of challenges that exist, around successful digital transformation, and particularly for the public sector. First one is this issue of digital divides and inequalities between and within countries, that goes all the way from infrastructure, what we usually call the digital connectivity, all the way to capacities, and it's within countries as well, between public and private sectors, between men and women, rural and urban areas, as well as between countries, between developed and developing economy. The issue is that also digital transformation sometimes contributes to violations of human rights online. Particularly, we're talking about, like the right to privacy, freedom of expression, access to information, and so on. A lack of transparency, accountability, and openness in digital platforms in particular. And the fact that technology changes a lot faster than regulation and norms can follow. So there's always some gap, to be closed. And the fact that there are weak or uneven capacities in many areas and in many groups in this particular element. UNESCO approaches the issue of digital transformation from a principled way. And for us is this, issue of having what we call the Rome Act approach, voluntary principles, adopted principles that member states have endorsed on how digital ecosystems should evolve. And we call them the Internet universality approach, because we think about, not universality not only in terms of connecting everyone, universal access, but also in terms of universal values that should be upheld. And so the Rome Act acronym is the human rights, the R, the rights. Digital ecosystems should be human rights based. They should be open to all, and the openness is not only in access, but in data, in knowledge, in markets, in opportunities for everyone to transform their access into socioeconomic development, accessible by all, and inclusively, so that platform features, for example, should welcome persons with disabilities. They should enable participation of those who speak languages that are not the majority languages of the internet. There are 7,061 languages in the world, but only about 300 are online. And in particularly, this issue of inclusive access in terms of artificial intelligence, particularly for countries from the global south. And of course, we talk about adopting a multi-stakeholder approach to governance, including internet governance, AI governance, that empowers everyone to participate effectively in digital ecosystems. And we also consider issues of cross-cutting issues such as the gender equality principles, the fact that Africa and small island developing states should be prioritized in development and safety online and so on. This Rome principles, I mean, just to complete, they serve as a kind of a compass to ensure that human rights-centered approach to technology development and adoption, and that should also be part of what we do in the public sector. And when we apply the Rome principles and use the indicators to assess at national or sub-regional levels, we can research, map, and improve the ecosystem by identifying gaps that exist and making recommendations for closing these gaps. And just as an aside, from the Caribbean, Dominican Republic is actually conducting a Rome assessment. And there are some conversations also for the Caribbean nations altogether to undertake a sub-regional assessment for themselves, so that they can pinpoint gaps that exist in the digital ecosystems developed. In the area of UNESCO where I work, what's called the communications and information sector, it's the area that leads on digital transformation processes, including the development, deployment, and use of artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies such as quantum and Internet of Things and so on. And our vision in here is that we need to empower everyone to make decisions, to contribute to and effectively participate in technology development, in regulation, in policy and capacity, and all the processes that are necessary and related to artificial intelligence from a human-centered perspective. And we tend to emphasize the use of an inclusive and accessible approach to digital transformation initiatives and strategies. And that's why we have a capacity building intervention cycle that is focused on the needs of users. And our focus is particularly looking at civil servants, because in all branches of government, they are the ones who tend to be lagging behind in terms of capacity development, but also the ones that are the most important in terms of guiding a country's digital transformation itself. And we work with all the branches. For example, we have a massive open online course and tools for the judiciary to help judicial actors such as judges, public prosecutors, attorneys from ministries and others, to understand how artificial intelligence can actually help accelerate access to justice, but also to understand what the potential harms that they can create. And it's all free and open access on the internet. So I'll put the links on the chat later on. We also start to work with legislatures to help them to understand, what are the gaps that exist in regulatory framework that they need to close. But we particularly focus on the executive branch, the ministries and the secretaries, and particularly those related to the IT area, to build capacities for the staff that really have the task of guiding, transformation for our country, and who are crucial to have the necessary competencies for that. And we use this cycle in which our team guides civil servants through a digital capacity assessment process at the level of individuals and the level of institutions, and compares that with our competency framework, which I'll be showing you in a moment. And we construct a tailored in-depth training process for government officials, then on base of those needs, and then we mentor them through this process of transformation, all along. It's a very much, a similar approach to what our colleagues, do wonderfully at DESA. And and it's really important that we do digital transformation right, because the kinds of opportunities that it opens for countries and for governments are enormous. So first of all, it really increases effectiveness and efficiency of public service delivery. For example, we have the rosy example that I put on the screen. This is a digital transformation effort actually by an NGO that helps. That the State Court of Justice in São Paulo, in Brazil, my home country, which deploys a digital solution that enables accelerated processing time for justice, judicial claims for processes that the traffic through court, and they accelerated them by 87% by having to pull some of these that are similar and routing them to similar judges, to the same judges, so that similar decisions can be made, and increases consistency also of the judicial process. Another issue is that it helps to address complex governance problems, because we know that global problems are interconnected, and they manifest themselves at national and local levels, and the governments at those levels cannot solve them alone. But they go, for example, from environmental degradation all the way to, and global warming, to the rising inequalities and so on. So these, governments that work on those problems, for them to work on those problems, they need not only to be working at these problems at local and national levels, but also to be coordinating with other stakeholders at the higher levels, regional and global levels. So that adds another dimension of complexity that artificial intelligence can help to mitigate. A third one is this issue of enabling public engagement, participation of citizens, as well as transparency and accountability, and strengthening those. For example, and that's what some of this process. There's a system in Brazil that is an anti-corruption system that uses publicly available data to track expenditures of government and identify opportunities for improvement, but also to combating corruption in that sense. And here, there's a slide, just the small letters, but you can have the slides later. It's just a series of examples of what artificial intelligence has been doing, for the public sector, for example, because not only governments can develop their own AIs, applications, but they also can buy some existing ones in the market. And many of those have to do with computer vision, virtual assistants, predictive analytics, robotics and automation, and so on. And use those to optimize, the provision of public services in their respective countries. And just a few examples, in Singapore, there's this virtual assistants that integrate a chatbot, essentially, that integrates responses by a citizen who calls on any area. So they track all the areas, that a person may be asking about construction in their city. Others may be looking at a national justice process, but they still, the same chatbot is able to respond to all these questions by integrating all the data set around that. Or a robot, for example, in Spain, that uses that helps to support quality of life for elderly people, by having these robots reminding them of the appointments they have, our time to take medication, and chatting with them to help them, improve their spirit and so on. But of course, there are challenges also, so there are all these opportunities, but the big challenges for the public sector are the fact that there are great barriers, three great barriers that need to be overcome. The first, is that we public sector tends to be a culture and organization that is averse to experimentation and to innovation. they have these hierarchical processes, things are well-defined, managers know what to do, and then comes these disruptive processes that sometimes, are not very supported. And therefore, there's lack of leadership support for innovative ideas, fear of failure, and so on and so forth. So that's an issue, that is complicates the process in the public sector. Another big barrier is the fact of data. The data structures for public sector, as incredible as it sounds, are even more complicated. Public sector collect a lot of data, but it's not necessarily well structured and organized for use in training artificial intelligence models, for example, or in being used to predict for predictive analytics and so on. And public sector tends to buy cheaper equipment, and so there's a lack of IT infrastructure investment, a lack of available and accessible data sets that are harmonized across different government entities, and there's a lack of mature data organization, data management, data governance processes, and so on. And that is one of the biggest barriers, is organizing the data approaches in the government. And a primary challenge in implementing digital transformation is the infrastructure gap that affects certain countries. For example, there's no big servers for storing large data sets, the weak broadband, there's a lower percentage of connected citizens, and so on. And then, so that even aggravates the process. And finally, the issues of human resource capacity and reason why we need so much capacity development in the public sector specifically, because more than anything, digital transformation actually requires talent, and public sector underinvests in training its own talent. Public servants tend to be undervalued, a bit neglected. There is a culture of outsourcing to consultants this kind of service, so that competencies are not ever acquired by the public sector itself. And then there's competition with the private sector that pays higher rates, and then steals the good well-trained people away from the public sector. And this is actually an issue that is absolutely well recognized. Some of the biggest blocks that chief information officers identify for implementation of digital solutions, successful digital transformation, are the issues of siloed strategies, the culture that blocks change, insufficient funding or budgets for the necessary investment, the lack of competencies and skills, and so on, the lack of digital leadership, and so on. So these are exactly, the barriers that we identify as well. So we developed this competency framework through a global multi-stakeholder approach. We consulted over 100 governments around the world. There were regional consultations in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and in the Caribbean, specific consultation for the Caribbean, and identifying this sets of competencies that are necessary, that governments themselves feel they lack in order to address, properly digital transformation. So, and what are those? So those are these three big sets of competencies that specifically look at not on the technology side. So we're not looking at how to train people in Python or in certain types of machine language approaches or not. We're looking at how do we transform mindset, how do we change mindset and prepare civil servants to really lead digital transformation processes. And there are three sets of competencies that we're talking about. The ability to do digital planning and design that enables civil servants to really understand the complexity of the problems, to recognize the strategy and opportunities to use digital solutions, and to envision and design inclusive transformation projects that actually are future-proof, that they don't have to be completely abandoned and modified when technology changes, as it will, naturally change all the time. A second group of competencies is the data use and governance. We equip civil servants to understand and use data, the fundamental role that data plays, the value that it has, the opportunities that it creates, the risks that exist in handling data, and so on. And it helps to support civil servants in addressing governance challenges and manage data effectively within their own organizations, but also to be, uphold ethics on data management and responsibility on privacy and so on. And the types of competencies we are talking about is like digital literacy, data-driven decision-making, open data and open governments, how to set it up, privacy and security issues, regulation of data and ethical frameworks, and so on. And the third and final set of competencies, we are talking about digital management and execution, with what empowers civil servants to understand the new and innovative project management and collaborative types of practices that help them to lead successful digital transformation approach. So it encourages civil servants to be agile, to be collaborative, to make the most of the kinds of rapid improvements that happens, to be creative and to innovate in different cycles of technology. We're talking about people centricity, iteration, agile execution, digital leadership, and so on. And just a few examples, one on each of these digital transformation competencies. We have this digital planning and design, for example, has 4 areas of digital competencies: problem identification and solutions, system thinking, strategic foresight, agile strategy. Each of those, you have competencies from basic to intermediate to advanced, and AI-specific competencies that help specifically with projects that are particularly critical and in the use of artificial intelligence. And so people can progress through these levels, as well as organizations can identify which kinds of staff in their own institutions need to master each of these types of competencies. To identify problems for which digital technology is adequate solution, understand how problems are connected, to anticipate problems and expect unexpected circumstances, and to plan initiatives that are flexible and adaptable, and so on. The data use and governance has a series of competencies, subfields area, that data literacy, data-driven decision-making, open data and open government, privacy and security, legal, regulatory, and ethical framework, how to create those for data, and fundamentals of artificial intelligence, also with the same, levels from basic to intermediate to advanced to AI-specific, and what kinds of knowledge, people require at each of those levels. And finally, digital management and execution, again, people centricity, iteration, agile execution, digital leadership, and the same levels and AI specific. So people centricity, for example, for agile execution at the basic level, to understand what is agile management, what are the techniques, to make, at the intermediate level, to use agile management techniques in designing projects, and at the advanced level, to how to organize and management digital transformation processes, and at the AI level, to master, a specific agile management technique, and create partnerships around, augmenting the powers of government to do that. And so, with our research and our experiences around the world, we've been working with, over 50 governments in these kinds of using this competency framework. We have developed 9 recommendations, some for supporting government in their digital transformation capacity development process. So it's recommendations specifically for capacity development for government. Some 5 are general, 1 is for private sector, 2 for governments, and 1 for academia. And the general ones are very simple. First of all, governments need to raise awareness around the need for the competences to be strengthened. Of course, you cannot really successfully lead digital transformation, artificial intelligence processes if your staff, your users, they don't understand that they need to upskill their own skills as well, their own competences for the systems to be effective. Then, the issues of contextualization, localization, and adaptation of digital transformation competencies. They're not necessarily the same everywhere. Certain countries have, more ability in creating chips, for example. So, of course, competencies for the staff, for the citizens are, high in this area, may not be so high in the areas of computer programming and so on. So they need to actually change and do analysis of their capacity needs on the basis of a local, context. And not only that, but in different teams, different departments, and so on. So, sorry. The third is that we need to share resources and knowledge. The more open source you make your training elements, the easier it is, the faster it is for competencies to be transferred, so creating learning hubs, multi-pathway curriculum with bringing together different organizations to help expedite, and increasing the available training elements is key. The fact that there's a need to monitor also the impact of capacity development, digital transformation processes, because quite a lot of this are started, but people don't really look at what the impact is. So are people truly learning? Are they using the skill sets? Are the organizations improving because of the use of skill sets? What needs to be adjusted, and so on? And to really create cooperation and mutual learning, fostering exchange, so that you can create the conditions and platforms for exchanging practices on artificial intelligence and AI on digital transformation capacity building processes. So at the national, regional, local, international level, as well. 4, of the recommendations are actually for other stakeholders. So the government ones is that really take a holistic approach when using the competency framework. Don't think that you can just work on the data and forget the other part. Really need to do this on an integrated way, so that really, the strategies can really be effective. And then, make sure that there are action plans developed to strengthen the specific competencies that are necessary for the government. For academia, they can use the digital competency framework to really think about what should they offer in terms of curricula and interdisciplinary programs to government officials. What should they be making available so that they can, help contribute to this process as well. And for the private sector, of course, make sure that they collaborate with governments to implement capacity building initiatives, as well as contribute their own expertise, their own knowledge, their learnings from other countries if they have it, so that it accelerates the digital transformation everywhere where they deploy their system. So let me stop here, and I'll be happy to answer your questions, any questions you have, or make any comments you have. And in the meantime, I'll be putting in the chat some of the links to some of the elements that I mentioned. So please, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marielza. There's so much content, and I am certainly looking forward to following up with you and with the links that you're going to be sharing in the chat. And so your question and comments, we invite you to use the chat feature to place those there, and we will address those, as many as we're able to. But we're going to go to the next presentation now. And the next presenter is Dr. Christina Rodriguez Acosta. She is the Interregional Advisor, Program Management and Capacity Development Unit in the Public Institution and Digital Government Division of the UN DESA. Again, her bio is in the information booklet around this webinar, and she will also be sharing her presentation with her colleague, Mr. Gregory McGann, who is the Program Management Assistant with the same division. And I'm learning he is a lecturer with Google in machine learning as well. So Christina and Gregory, over to you both.
Thank you, Lois, for that generous introduction, and thank you for everyone who's joining us. Let me share my screen and make sure that you're all looking at the same. No, can you see my screen, or what is it sharing? No. Yeah.
We saw your screen, but not the presentation.
Yeah, let me just make sure that. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you so much. So thank you, Mariosa, for your presentation on AI, because we know that, when we're talking about innovation, digital government, and changing mindsets, nowadays AI is the topic of the moment. Everybody's talking about AI. But innovation, is more than just the use of AI and technologies in government. And sometimes innovation can just be a change in the way we're doing things. So I want to comment on my presentation about innovation and the importance of having an innovation or experimental mindset. For those who attended the first webinar where Dr. Adriana Alberti talked about changing mindset, we mentioned the importance of changing our mindset, changing the way we approach issues and problems in the public sector to deliver better public services. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about what is innovation mindset and why is it important to have it in the public sector, so we can provide better services to the people, which at the end of the day is the most important role and job that the public sector has. So what is innovation? We know there are many different definitions about innovation. What does it mean to innovate? But I think that I want you to think about innovation, about the generation and implementation of valuable new ideas. We don't have to reinvent the wheel each time, but we can look at complex problems with a different approach, with a more collaborative approach, and find new ways of doing things. So when we're talking about innovation, we're talking about creating public value and doing things in a different way, being creative, but the creativity must be linked to action. We cannot just stay in the mind of thinking this is a great idea and this is the way we're going to change. We actually need to do it. So digital transformation requires new skills and new mindsets. We know that nowadays technology is offering us a great variety of ways of innovate, different ways of approaching problems, but that requires a change of mindsets. As Maria Elsa mentioned, the public sector faces very challenging issues when it comes to innovation because of the culture of the organizations, because of resistance to change. So it's important to think about new skills and new mindsets, and how do we upskill and reskill the public sector for innovation. So what is an innovation mindset? What does it mean to have an innovative or experimental mindset for the public sector? And this is part of the UN DESA framework that my colleague Adriana presented in the previous webinar. So when an innovation or experimental mindset is one that has as a basic belief that human capacities are not fixed, that we can change, and that we all have the ability to learn and to continue to change. Though the attitude that such a public employee or a public sector civil servant employee would have is an attitude of a risk taker, somebody who's eager to experiment, who's a problem solver, who's resilient, who's creative, and who's willing to change and try things. So the competencies that we're looking for are those of people who can do strategic problem solving, who can take a broad approach, who can think strategically in not just a short term, but a long term. We're also looking for people who are creative and who are not afraid to innovate. So these are some of the basic competencies that we're looking to instill in the public sector so we can have an innovative or experimental mindset. It doesn't mean that those who are already in the public sector don't have it. It's that we need to change the way we approach problems and the way we think about it so we can allow for these values and these attitudes that many of us have and that most of us have to flourish, to be able to implement them. An innovation mindset, though, is then based in a methodology, broadly speaking, that thrives in teamwork, in collaboration. You're willing to work together with others. We're open to working together in teamworks. We promote an environment in the public sector that allows for collaboration and cooperation, not just within our own department, but within departments, within different levels of government. We're also looking for an attitude, for a mindset that promotes the user, that has that eccentric an approach, as Maria Elsa mentioned. We have the citizens, we have the people we're providing the services to in the center of our concerns. They are the way we work, and we propose solutions or innovations that are centered on their needs. And this requires, of course, a lot of communicating, a lot of different techniques that exist for meeting the needs, for understanding where the real needs of the citizens, of the residents, and not just what we think are the needs. It also requires co-creation. We're willing to co-create not only with the citizens, with the residents, but also with academia, with the private sector, with many different stakeholders. We're also willing to work on prototyping solutions. We do not think of this is the final product, this is the final solution, and we work towards the end. We work in an experimental mindset. We're working in small steps. We propose a first type of solution, we prototype it, we test it, we try it, and if it doesn't work, we will go back to the basics and start again. That's why another element that is important in an innovation mindset has to do with this point of failing frequently, learning and moving on. It's not that we look for failure, but we're willing to accept failure as a learning methodology and as a way to move forward. And I think we can all agree that this is probably one of the biggest challenges we have in the public sector, because it's very difficult to deal with failure in the public sector because we're not supposed to fail. So this requires a change of mindset and a different attitude in the way we work. So what is then a digital mindset? This is also based on the UN DESA digital competencies frameworks and in a toolkit that we have developed on innovation and digital mindset that is available to all of you. So the belief in a digital mindset, as Maria Elsa had also mentioned, has to do with the belief that we can leverage digital technologies, that we can leverage technologies to provide better challenges, to provide better solutions to challenges in the public sector. So the attitude is not only that we can use and support governance using technology, but we're also aware of the risks of using technology. The competencies is not only the technical stuff, understanding data, understanding the uses of data, understanding the technologies, but also keeping abreast of those challenges and the knowledge that is out there, but also how we can best apply it to our work. Not everyone has to use artificial intelligence. Not everyone has to be an expert in Python language or in coding. But we all need to understand, what does digital technology means in our line of work? Do we have the skills, the necessary skills, and how do we prepare the public sector for that? So the digital mindset, it's a learning mindset, it's a mentality, it's an experience of constantly being, learning, and knowing what are some of the challenges that we face when it comes to the implementation on digital transformation. So we all know that the capacity to innovate varies tremendously between countries. This was mentioned also in the previous presentation. That has to do a lot with the context in which we're working, with the resources available. And we also know that many countries around the world, even the most developed, are still facing challenges when it comes to effectively using digital technologies and how to adapt the public sector to the use of digital technologies and what it means to use digital technology or promoting innovation through digital technologies. But we can say that there are 5 main principles when we're talking about innovation in public services that have to do with access, quality, being inclusive and responsiveness, people-driven transparent and accountable. So when we're talking about innovation in the public sector, we are looking for innovations that broaden the access of services to the people. It's not just the group, but the whole of society. We're also looking for programs in innovation that, of course, improve the quality of those services, that are inclusive to the most vulnerable, to all. No one is left behind. And they're also responsive to the needs, to the actual needs of our public, that are people-driven and that are personalized services. They respond to the needs of the groups, and those services are transparent and accountable. We know who is implementing it, we know who's accountable, and why we're doing it. We also talk about 6 key steps when we're talking about designing a roadmap for innovation and digital transformation. And this kind of repeats a little bit of what Maria Elsa mentioned, the importance of having a holistic approach, of looking at the whole of society and the whole of government when we're talking about innovation and digital transformation, and not just our silo or the area that we work. We're also highlighting the importance of system thinking, thinking of the global, of an overall strategy, a strategic framework. We should know where we're going and how we're getting there. We need to do a stakeholder analysis. We need to understand what are the role that other stakeholders can play, how can they support what we're doing, and how can we support their work as well. So it's co-creation, it's collaborative, this strategy, and of course the action. We need to plan the action and how we're going to get to where we go. There's some of the characteristics of those countries that are leading when it comes to in terms of innovation. And again, it has to do with system thinking, with having a clear vision of their policy making. There is a need, an understanding, and steps towards reorganizing institutions. It's not easy to collaborate, to co-create with other levels of government and across the government and with all of society. So the countries that are able to reorganize the institutions and to rethink the way they work are those who tend to be the most innovative or most advanced when it comes to digital transformation. It also requires a change in structures of the organizations within organizations as well. It requires a lot of openness and willingness to change and to try new things. Those changes in structures are accompanied by a change on culture and new skills, and this is very relevant to our topic of changing mindsets. We do require a change in mindsets, a change in attitudes and the way we work, so we can also prepare the public sector, the new skills that we need to promote innovation and digital transformation. The UN recognizes that every country can innovate and that technologies can facilitate innovation and that innovation breeds innovation. And there are a lot of public sector initiatives that are innovative and that can promote digital transformation, that can promote the provision of better services. So the UN has established the UN Public Service Awards, and I was just to very briefly mention it here. I encourage all of you to participate. This is done annually, and it's a recognition of initiatives around the world that in a way support innovation. When we see others innovating, we might be incentivized to innovate. So these are some of the winners from the 2022 UN PSA Awards. And we were actually looking for proposals from the Caribbean and winners. And I was able to find one from Dominica in 2011 on using technologies and better information for fisheries management. So I want to encourage all of you who are attending this webinar to think about this UN Public Service Awards and encourage you to look at innovations that you're already implementing and that could be a candidate for next year's awards. So I want to end with this last slide that has to do with what are some of the enablers for promoting digital skill, innovation, and changing mindsets in the public sector. Well, one of the biggest enablers, I think, is political commitment, is leadership. We need the support of our leaders. We can also be leaders from our jobs where we are to promote innovation, to promote a change of mindset that will be facilitating an environment of innovation and digital transformation. We need to support a culture of transformation for this leadership, investing in our human resources, in changing the capacity and the mindset of our human resources. We need to promote system thinking and synergies that allow for this complementarity in training policies and making sure that they are implemented. This change in organizational structures is also very important. Funding, of course, funding is always an issue. There never will be enough funding, but the appropriate funding needs to be there, and we need to make sure that we're using it in a proper and correct way. Thus, the comments on transparency and accountability. It is important to have the appropriate legislation and regulations at the national level, at the organizational level, so we can promote an environment of innovation. Failure, for example, requires of a change not only of mindset, but also in the regulations. There should be an acceptance to failure that is not always there in our rules. The involvement of all stakeholders is very important when we talk about an environment of innovation in the public sector and for digital transformation. We cannot stress enough the importance of monitoring, reporting, and evaluation processes of what we're doing when it comes to promoting innovation and digital transformation in the public sector. It's the bread and butter of what we're doing, and to be transparent and accountable to our citizens. And finally, we need to promote a skills-based approach to hiring and promotion. We need to move from just this rigid job descriptions and requirements for skills in the public sector, because innovation and digital transformation is flexible, requires more flexibility. We might not need a 4-year degree, university degree. We just may need certifications and trainings. This also requires a change in mindset from us and from the public sector in the way we approach innovation. So these are some of the basic enablers that we think are important when we're talking about innovation and digital transformation. As I mentioned, UN DESA has developed a series of toolkits that support the public sector in these topics, and I'll be happy to share in the chat the link to that as well. And with that, I'll thank you for your attention, and I will now give the floor to my colleague Gregory McGannon for his presentation on the emerging AI regulatory environment. Gregory, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Christina. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I think I've got around 5 minutes to do this. I'll do it very quickly. Next slide. Let's start off with the relative context of AI development. As we're all well aware, in the abstract, AI is improving very swiftly. You can see here several particular kind of modalities of AI: handwriting recognition, speech recognition, image recognition, reading comprehension, and the way in which there is a clear acceleration of capacities. The most important benchmark is the MMLU, which is the Massive Multitask Language Understanding benchmark, which was at around the best model in 2020 was BERT, which was at around 25% capacity, 25% of human level. And in 2023, Google released Gemini Ultra, which is at about 90%. So as you can see, it's quickly speeding up. And that's largely been achieved because of scale. And BERT was at around 125 million parameters, which is an approximation of a neural network size required to train it. And Gemini had about 1.7 trillion. So you can see the difference in scaling, which leads us on to the future slides. But there's clearly one of the additional context to this is that AI governance is substantially underfunded by comparison with AI technical development. So although we receive a distorted view of this, because often the public conversations are about regulation, but these are very typically people who are not actually working on it. The funded positions are for increasing capacity, not increasing governance. So there's a substantial gap in actual work hours between governance and AI, but that hasn't stopped people, as we'll see, putting forward draft legislation, and in the case of the European Union, actually drafting it. So next, please. Excuse me. Okay, so the essence of policy reactions to AI has focused on dealing with each separate part of what we consider to be the supply chain, as it were, of artificial intelligence. So that starts off with the infrastructure, which would be the hardware and the servers on which AI operates, and then after that the models and the model training, and then finally the applications. So ChatGPT, for instance, is an application. Behind the application is the model, which is either GPT 3.5 or GPT-4 Turbo at the moment. And then the infrastructure is Microsoft Azure. So there are these three different levels, and each of the comprehensive legislation has to deal separately with each one of these levels. And in each of these case studies, there's actually quite a marked divergence between how they deal with each one of these things: infrastructure, models, and applications. Okay, let's go to the next. So the European Union already has by far the most developed regulatory environment for artificial intelligence, machine learning, and digital services. It already has 3 pieces of core legislation involving digital services, which are the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, and the GDPR. Broadly speaking, the Digital Services Act deals with the applications that already existed, such as the models used by Google and Microsoft and now OpenAI. The Digital Markets Act deals with competitive practices and monopolistic practices which are perceived to be in place, which is such as like gatekeeping. So the idea that there would be that there's a market distortion happening because certain companies control too much of the market. And finally, the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which deals with personal data privacy. And this has relevance for AI already because the models are trained on data, and they are generally operated by firms that are already bound by the regulation of the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. Next. So this year, the European Union introduced the AI Act, which is a risk-based approach, and they delineate risk into unacceptable risk, limited risk, minimal risk, and high risk. So this is the discourse around the AI Act has largely been its impact on business, but the minimal risk, which is not regulated at any sort of prohibitive level, actually includes chatbots and recommender systems, which at the moment create around 3/4 of all actual value added in artificial intelligence. The high risk categories are primarily focused on law enforcement, education, healthcare, and the banned categories are those which involve national security, and for example, biometric use checking with artificial intelligence, although importantly, there is actually a carve out for urgent national security matters. With regard to the breakdown of the tech stack, the infrastructure, there's actually it's not really much talk about the infrastructure in the AI Act, which is important when we compare it with the United States, but the environmental impact is noted. So for example, approximately one report noted that in the next 3 years, AI servers will consume about the electricity capacity every year of Sweden. So it's clearly, but infrastructure has a broader environmental impact, and that was noted in the AI Act. So that's being monitored. Models, it governs the data usage and governance processes. So when models are being trained, there's a relatively opaque process at the beginning, which is the initial training, which we still can't easily decompose at a technical level. So we can't govern it easily. We can govern the data input, and then at the later stage, we have something called reinforcement learning from human feedback, which is surveillable. So at two stages, the input stage and then the alignment stage, which is the reinforcement learning of human feedback, there is a opportunity for governance, and that is noted in the AI Act. Applications. So this is really the focus of the EU's legislation. So they are focused on the actual usage of AI rather than the training or the infrastructure. And so it is here that the legislation is important. It's about bringing something to market, and it is about the impacts on consumers and other members of the public. It should be noted that there is a noted distinction between proprietary AI, which is more regulated, and open source AI. So open source AI has a significant carve out in the AI Act, which indicates that if you share your code that produced your model, which is what we call open source, open weighting. So we release the weights, which is basically the breakdown of a neural network. You are released from many of these obligations. So then it becomes that is meant to incentivize a more open environment, more transparent environment. Next. The United States has taken a markedly different approach. Even from its existing legislation, which I won't explain in detail, but the existing legislation is primarily infrastructure focused and national security focused. So it deals with the way in which it impacts, way in which applications currently of AI impact core national priorities. So that's slightly different from the EU approach, which doesn't really consider infrastructure. Next. So there is no comprehensive AI Act in the process of being drafted in the United States. There's no congressional process at the moment, but there was an executive order issued by the Biden-Harris White House, which was, as I said, markedly different in its intense focus on critical infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, and its usage of the Defense Production Act in both infrastructure and models, and it is unambiguously focused on preventing AI falling into the hands of what it perceives to be bad actors internationally. There is much less emphasis than in the AI Act on applications for consumers. So this is primarily focused on regulating cloud computing, regulating data provision. So where is data stored? This is actually part of the discussion currently about the banning of TikTok. Where is data stored, and where are those servers monitored? Next. So this is an example of final example of infrastructure of regulation that was being considered. India proposed at the end of last year some draft legislation on AI capabilities, and it didn't really talk about infrastructure, which is unsurprising because it doesn't have any of the major cloud providers domestically, but it was considered to be the most robust action on models because it required the pre-registering of models before deployment. Neither the EU nor the US has considered that. So it would have required, for example, OpenAI to pre-register ChatGPT before it was deployed. And this would apply even to open source models. So, but actually, as a result of the reception, this was actually dropped, and there is now no forthcoming legislation on artificial intelligence in India. So I hope this has provided a whistle-stop tour of the basic contours of artificial intelligence legislation in the world.
Thank you so much, Gregory and Christina. Man, I have so many questions. So much food for thought, but we know we're going to come to those question and answers. Our final, but not by any means least, the presentation by Mrs. Prudence James Townsend. She is the Director of Business Development and Communication at the Management Institute for National Development, Jamaica. And she will be sharing on the role of the public service training institutions in supporting public sector innovation. So Prudence, you're up at the wicket.
So we have established a context, and for the next few minutes that I'll be speaking, it is to provide the scope of what innovation is for us, and it's very similar to what Mrs. Acosta would have spoken to, and then to discuss the application of that innovation as MIND is undertaking as we speak and continuing into the future. So we would have heard, once you hear AI, automatically a lot of persons think about ChatGPT. So I did ask ChatGPT within the context of what is required for this particular webinar, what is innovation? And this is what ChatGPT responded, and I agree. So the critical aspects are introducing new ideas. And as was said before, it doesn't have to change the entire system. It can actually be very gradual, but it is done in hope of improving something that already exists. And in improving, it is to cause a greater level of outcome at some point. So it is to enhance effectiveness, efficiency, responsiveness of government ministries, departments, or agencies. Fundamentally, what we're aiming for is service excellence. And that is the experience that is most important. So, as was said before, innovation doesn't necessarily have to be AI, but this one is more so for the gentleman. I think we know by the picture what this is. And innovation, one of the issues that was facing this particular company is that there was a lot of, let's say, spillage that was causing a lot of expenses to hiring more staff, to hiring, to buying more products to get the place clean and presentable for all the customers. So this was causing millions and millions of dollars each year. Now, innovatively, one might say, how are we going to fix this problem? Is it that we're going to put up more signs? Is it that we're going to get some new technology? What are we going to do? Because it's a strategic problem. It's impacting our bottom line. It's impacting the experience that our customers are having. What are we going to do? This particular organization, what they did was apply human behavior, creative thinking. And believe it or not, that dot that you see there is an engraved flag. And once that was done, the outcome, remember when we spoke about innovation, it is to cause an ultimate enhancement. In this case, it is efficiency. It is a better customer experience. And just by placing that fly in the urinal, there is over 80% reduction in spillage, thus costing the company much less and basically mitigating against the problem that they were having. So innovation comes in a lot. Innovation comes in a variety of ways. Another example of innovation, for those who have had the opportunity to visit Disney, you will realize that it's a lot of people that they actually have to accommodate each year. It's very busy. And so because you have so many persons in one location, what's going to happen is that you must have lines, you must have queues because multiple persons want to see a particular attraction. So there's a science behind it. And here to the right of my screen, you'll see some examples of how innovation, technology, digitization, as well as just being, as I said, creative in thought, to cause then the experience of Disney, even in a line, to be a part of the attractions. So I'll just pull one as an example. there's an interactive display TV. So as you go along in the lines, you will see there's multiple large screens and you're able to interact with them. And then as opposed to being in the line and noticing that you're there, oh my God, 1 hour or 45 minutes, then because you're so occupied, you don't even realize. And the experience that you have is fully enriched. Again, this is innovation at work. So innovation can be in various ways. Here are 7 types. And as I go through for the application to what MIND does, you will see that it moves from various areas: product, process, service, organizational. So you will see it applying to more than one or multiple of these business innovation. And in addition to this, which a previous speaker had alluded to as well, even within the realm of innovation, there are degrees of innovation. So whether it is placing, drawing a fly, engraving a fly in a urinal versus AI, or something that is very industry changing, very radical. It's all innovation, but at varying degrees. So this is very important for us to have that context. So you have innovation. Innovation, it can be ideas, it can be technology, and even in the innovation, there are degrees. So it can be very gradual, and it can also go to the extreme of being completely drastic. So let's take it closer to home now. Now, having looked at the context and so on, let us look at MIND. And at our core, as Dr. Brown started in the video that you saw earlier, our focus is on building capability building capability of public officers for service excellence. So we're here in the training and development business to cause the end so that all of our public officers can do a very good job at what they do. And that's not only in Jamaica, but also the wider Caribbean. Now, when we speak of officers, we're also including our leaders. And as you would have heard before, that particular group, it was pinpointed as a challenge. So we know this, and great focus is being placed on this group as well. So we're developing the necessary skills, the knowledge, the attitude to ensure that there's this strategic understanding of what needs to be done, and then that filters down through the system in actual learning and development. Natasha Gordon-Miller, the second lady that spoke in the video as well, spoke to what MIND does. So we have off-the-shelf programs that deals with capacity development, and we also have customized interventions because the needs of each ministry, department, and agency is different. So not everything is going to be cookie cutter. And as we go in and we assess and we realize the learning needs and also the needs of the organization, then that particular intervention is tailor-made to cause the desired outcomes and the behaviors that are required actually by the various organizations. Dr. Brown spoke to the public sector learning framework. Now, this for us is innovation, right? So what it is, it's a whole of government blueprint of developing public sector officers. So it's a complete enhancement of the professionalization of Jamaica's public sector.
Prudence, I'm sorry, Prudence, so sorry to interrupt, but we do have 10 minutes left in the webinar.
Sure.
And, we do want to give our participants an opportunity to have, pose questions or comments.
So, all right. Thanks, Lord. All right. So in looking at the framework has 8 elements. And by looking at it, in other words, as a professional, we look at the entire public sector, and each professional is placed on a professional pathway. So you have auditors, you have finance, you have HR, so on and so forth. And once in that professional pathway, you are developed with, and this is now in the learning pathways, you get the particular competencies that you need. So whether it is, as was spoken about before, artificial intelligence, whether it is greater IT, leadership, whatever that need, it is done in a comprehensive way. And then the entire system can look at this and say, as the public sector of Jamaica, where are our strengths? Where are our weaknesses? Where do we need to develop and so on? So you get this better look at the big data to make very strategic decisions, not just at a military level, but at the wider service. Additionally, as was spoken to, the leadership is very, very important. And so MIND spends a lot of time in its application to ensure that there's development of this group. So through our public lecture, our policy forum, or executive roundtables and so on, we give the leaders the ability to develop on these competencies. Additionally, what is very important as well is that forum to discuss regulations. What are we doing? The CEO of Google, for instance, Sundar Pichai, says that regulators have to get ahead, or at least very close to the AI movement. What is happening? What is Jamaica doing? What is the Caribbean doing? So as MIND, we are that secretariat where we allow for these leaders to have those safe conversations as we plan to go forward. So it is and another thing as well is our upcoming conference is also another avenue through which we allow, or we share what is best practice, benchmarked, and so on. And we create another forum for leaders to discuss, generate ideas, learn what is happening to impact not only, again, Jamaica, but the wider Caribbean. Impact. So finally, when we look at all that is done, additional to that, what is important is it creating the impact that is needed? And MIND is at the forefront of creating a Government of Jamaica's training impact framework to actually measure, to say, yes, all this capital development that we're actually partaking in is creating the sort of impact that we wish. So in a nutshell, this is pretty much what MIND is about, what we're doing on the ground. It's a strategic application of the training and development. It is leadership development support. It is facilitating that knowledge sharing. We design not only off the shelf, but also customized learning interventions. And we create that safe space, those forums for all leaders to express themselves, gain new ideas, to go back to their various ministries, departments, and agencies, and create the kind of impact that is needed. So that is it from me, Loy, and I will facilitate any questions at the required time. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prudence. I'm going to invite you to, okay, yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have heard all of the presentations, and we're going to have just a very brief poll, and it's going to come up momentarily. We want to find out of the list below, which one is not part of an innovation mindset. So we'll ask our writer producer to upload this quickly. And there it is, just 1 minute. We're just going to ask you, let us see what are your perspectives on this. We'll just give it another couple of seconds. All right, and we'll just end the poll here and share the results. And so overwhelmingly, our attendees here believe that, human capacities are fixed. That is definitely not a part of the innovation mindset. We're going to quickly share another poll. And this one is, how can the public sector adopt and/or adapt to artificial intelligence? And we're asking you to choose 2 of the options provided. So we're going to bring that up. Yes. Give it another 30 seconds. And while you're doing that, just because we know we're almost out of time, but maybe perhaps you could give us an extra 5 minutes to allow for a few comments or a few responses to maybe a question or 2. Going to end that poll now. And let me share those results. And you should be seeing that. So the top two selections are providing necessary training to civil servants and devising an artificial intelligence strategy that addresses the ethical concerns. All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you for your participation in our polls. So you can use the chat and you can also raise your hand quickly. But do you have any comments or any questions at this time? And I see quite a few of you are saying the very informative session and expressing your thanks. And also notice in the chat that the resources that were promised, and lots of resources have been placed in the chat. So you want to just make sure that you take a note of those and to follow up with them. So there are those from UN DESA, that also the curriculum and governance for the SDGs, that toolkit from UN DESA. That link is also in the chat. And so there's a question from Stephanie Matthews. What are the strategies being implemented by MIND to facilitate digital transformation? And our executive director of CARICAD is also asking, can MIND give an example of a successful capacity development intervention to implementation of innovation in government? So it's really not just the capacity development intervention, but how that then translated into successful implementation of innovation in government. So Prudence, if you want to just take those two questions for us.
All right, sure. So let's try to go up. Can I give us an example of a successful capacity development intervention, implementation of innovation in government? Sure. So we have the management analyst program, and through this, it's the leaders were in this session, you know, having gone through this, a very comprehensive program, actually, about a year long or so. And not only there's artificial intelligence that is in there as a part of the courses and its application. And once the professionals, they've completed this, they have gone back. We've done one cohort already from the Ministry of Finance, and having gone back to assess, you know, how has this helped you in terms of your functioning within the ministry, because they impact the wider public service, and it has been overwhelmingly positive. So they have used this to adjust things, for instance, like organizational structures, to allow them to say, okay, how can we streamline efficiencies, not only in the Ministry of Finance, but also across that affects things like compensation and so on. So for the MAP program, that is one application. We have our public sector leadership development program as well, where we facilitate a lot of capacity development for leaders. And just the mindset, changing that mindset to one that is agile. So it is one that can allow them to respond more in that VUCA kind of climate that we know currently operating. And these persons go back and affect their various ministries, departments, and agencies. We have had persons who have been such as the head of PICA, that's our Passport, Immigration, and Citizenship Agency, who speaks very highly of how our interventions have supported him in terms of how he processes to impact that particular agency, customs as well. So just how our leaders operate and think to facilitate that innovation throughout is very, very impactful. And finally, because of where MIND sits, even in terms of when COVID had hit, not everyone was able to make that transition online. So from that technological point of view as well, we had to do a lot of upskilling from the basic level, believe it or not, to allow for persons to be more comfortable with moving online for their training. And that helped as well for the simulation of information, so we could have that transfer of knowledge. So to just round that out, I think you had asked for one, but our MAP program to help to help that particular set of technocrats to apply the innovation in their various ways to improve the structures, not only at the Ministry of Finance, but across various agencies, and as well as our leadership development programs where we have our leaders together, and then that impact of an agile mindset to operate in a VUCA environment, and then helping just even at the operational or basic level persons to be prepared to operate or to usefully function in the online space for learning and development. So those are just 3 quick areas that mine has impacted to respond to the question that was asked.
Okay, thank you. And there are continuing to be a lot of resources and links to resources from UN DESA and UNESCO. So please do look for those in the chat and do follow up. We probably have time for maybe one other question. And I'm going to take the question from Ian. And so Ian asks, and any of the panelists can take this. It says, please explain the governance framework required for artificial intelligence, performance monitoring. I don't know if Gregory, you want to, give some insights around that question.
Yes. So the question is regarding artificial intelligence monitoring.
Monitoring, yes.
Yeah, please explain governance framework required for AI performance monitoring. So probably there has to be a so it's the choice between frameworks is one in which was drafted in India and is being implemented in China, which is that they have to submit the models prior to deployment, and then they are internally tested. And the one being considered elsewhere is that they have to submit the results rather than being tested, rather than the entire model being given over. But there's a great difficulty to this approach because it requires, I think, a great deal more imagination than is currently being given to it, because these models are statistical models. They're inherently probabilistic, and by fact of their training, which uses something called stochastic gradient descent, they actually don't use the data set linearly. They actually sample the data set and then use the sampling to determine the shape of the model. And since we can't, so you can't look at the data set and determine the outcome, nor can you, no two responses from a language model or from an AI are going to be identical. So we have to think in a new way. Governance frameworks have to think in a way that really incorporates this intrinsic uncertainty. But the 2 ways, as I explained, are mainly that either the model is submitted whole, and that's actually submitted to government testing by government technicians, or the results are submitted by companies. And I believe that's why there's also a distinction for open source modeling, because then that will be tested in a more transparent way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gregory. Thank you so much. So folks, so unfortunately, we are out of time. And so we want to go straight to the evaluation poll, and you will see the link to the poll coming up shortly. There it is in the chat, and we invite you, please, to fill out a very short evaluation poll. And next Wednesday will be the final in our webinar series. And we will be looking at country experiences in changing mindsets, innovation, and digital government transformation. And that will include presentations on country experiences from the Eastern Caribbean, from Azerbaijan, as well as Uruguay. So you really don't want to miss that. So with that, all that's left is for me to say thank you. Thank you for your engagement. Thanks to all of the presenters. And thank you especially for the various resources that you have shared with us. And we're hoping that we to also capture those and to send those out with the link to the recording for this presentation. So just going to invite you to look out for that. And for those who may have missed it, you can also catch the recording on our YouTube channel, Caribbean Center for Development Administration. So with that, I bid you all a good day, good afternoon, or good night, depending on where you're joining us from today. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank you so
day.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.